Good morning, everybody. I'm just making sure everything is on. Beautiful. The comments. Good morning, everybody. This is our weekly Q&A. My apologies for having to reschedule it the last 2 weeks from our normal Sunday to Tuesday. Just had a couple of hiccups with Wi-Fi, and then I was I had something on this Sunday. So my apologies there, but that's why I'm doing it today. And we'll be back to normal next Sunday. So just making sure everything is on. I can see everything. Cool. So if you're on and you have any questions, so once again, we've got some new members in the group. So a big warm welcome to all our new members. It's lovely having you in the group. Thank you for joining. If you don't know, I do a weekly Q&A in the group, and you can ask me anything in relating to your horse, off the track thoroughbreds. I know some of the members have standees and that as well. So if you have, it doesn't have to be an off the track thoroughbred. It's just that's my specialty. But everything, the way I train and retrain using equitation science principles relates to all horses and also horse management in general. So if you can't make the live, just pop a question in the group. You can put up a post, or when I do a notification that I'm coming on live, you can just pop your question in the comments below and I'll answer that for you in the weekly live. So cool, just making sure I can see any comments here. Cool. So I hope everybody is well. It's been such a tough year, hasn't it? We've got Christmas coming up, so let's try and enjoy the holiday season, and hopefully next year will be a little bit better. COVID has sort of worn a lot of us down. And once again, because of the big, such a lot is happening in the world at the moment, it's so nice to have the opportunity to be in a group. And I think how our Facebook group has been really good for that. It's a community. We all have off the track thoroughbreds or a standee or something in common. And it's really nice to have some type of community. I just know this year my online friends, and I've got some, I think one of my closest friends actually are some people I've never met. I would say my best friends are some people I've actually never met. So it's amazing what we can do nowadays, isn't it? And connect through the internet. I feel really grateful for that, particularly this year, particularly with my business. And saying that, I have a lot of really good goals and some wonderful plans for the Off the Track Thoroughbred Success Academy and the Facebook group. And I actually have another community that I am in the process of building as well. We've already got a few members in there, which is a monthly subscription. So lots of wonderful things coming up in the future. So our weekly Q&A. So I've got a topic I want to talk about. But first of all, I wanted to share, you can't see the color here, but I've got, my shoulders look, my posture look a little bit wonky. I want to share my branded merchandise. I wonder if you can see it. So here is my shirt. I'm sort of all squishy. I wanted to, so that's my logo. I've got some branded shirts, and I've actually got some caps I'm picking up today. I was so excited. And have a look if you can see it. My chair's in the way. Well, can you see my logo at the back? It's actually a pink. It looks a little bit apricot-y, so I can't see, turn around in that, but this is my I've got brand colors, as you can see in the group, which is a magenta, a jade, a gold, and a black. So this is my branded shirt, and I love it. So I just wanted to share that because I was very excited getting my my branded merchandise together. So okay. So I wanted to have, just as I said, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. If for some reason you've commented and I haven't answered, it's because it hasn't come up. I have had this problem in the past. So hopefully all is good, but tech can be a little bit confusing. Just checking the comments now. What's it doing? Okay, what's it doing? Holy moly. Okay, I think all's good. Cool. Okay, so if for some reason you've popped a comment in and I haven't answered it, it's because it hasn't shown. So my apology if that happens, but I think all should be good. So what I wanted to talk about today is a post that I put up. Let me just fix myself up here. I feel like I'm a little bit like a talking head. Is a post that I put up yesterday in regards to, I'm just going to find it on my phone, fear in horses or training with fearful methods. Let me just see if I can bring it up. Here we go. So I put up a post yesterday, a did you know post, saying that did you know fear in horses manifest as a flight response? Okay, so this is a really big thing, particularly with retraining off the track thoroughbreds, because thoroughbred racehorses, they actually experience a lot of fearful moments. I've worked in racing for a long time. I've worked over nearly 18 years now, and it's a very highly stimulating environment. It's very demanding on the horses, and they come into the industry very, very young, and it's scary. And look, the horsemanship. There's some wonderful trainers out there, but I'm going to say that the level of horse management and the level of horsemanship is extremely low in racing. You get a lot of young people and inexperienced people handling the horses, stable hands, and even track work riders. Look, track work riders, we're a tough breed. But a lot of the education that's provided in racing is zilch, zero. Racing industry provides no education at all when it comes to equine welfare, horse management, things like that. So people are basically on their own, and the level of experience when it comes to the level of knowledge, I'm going to say, when it comes to horse management and training and ethical training, and that is very low when it comes to training and ethical training. And and unfortunately the horses suffer because of this. I think I think thoroughbred racehorses are amazing, but they do experience a lot of fear. And so when you get your off the track thoroughbred, a lot of issues come up. So a lot of people will say, look, my horse pulls back, they don't like to be touched. It's like you need to look at your off the track thoroughbred as needing a bit of a rehabilitation program. Even if they're really quiet, they quite often will internalize things. Some can be very, very quiet, but they'll shut down. If they've been in racing, and especially if they've been in racing for a considerable amount of time, they've had, a decent race career, there's going to be some level of experience of fear, definitely. I think this is really important because horses are prey animals. They run fear is their first go-to for survival. So it's what they do to survive in the wild. Okay, the way that they survive is they run. They don't have any other defenses. So a horse doesn't have horns or antlers or anything to protect themselves, because even though we've domesticated horses, their innate makeup is still there. They're a prey animal, and their first line of defense is to flee, is to run. So if anything spooks them, if they're afraid in any situation that we've put them in a domestic environment, okay, their first go-to is going to shy, is going to run, is going to escape in some type of way, or try to escape. So that may manifest as pulling back. If the tie-ups, that may manifest as shying, bolting, rearing, evasion to being touched. So they're going to move away from something. This is their fear response, and we want to avoid the horses, we want to avoid our horse expressing that fear response as best we can. So I think the first thing is to be aware of when you have an off the track thoroughbred, they've experienced fear, they've expressed fear. So I'll just go through what I mentioned if you haven't seen the post. So fear in horses manifests at the flight response. Okay, so they're going to run. Horses are incredibly fast, and they're once again going back to their natural environment. They're in open plains. They live in a herd environment. The herd environment is part of their protection. Okay, being in a social group, one will identify, here's something, and they all run. And also two, because they're in they're open plain animals and they're grazing on open plains. They're out in the they're in sight of prey animals. So once again, their first line of defense is to run, and to run fast. Horses will shy first and then look back and see what it was later. So if there's anything that is out of line, something's been put in there. For instance, my horses, what did I change? I did a bit of a rearrange around this week and moved some things around where I bring the horses in the yards and that. And like Tommy was just like, whoa. And Tommy, he's 16. I'm actually doing a retraining program with him now, some videos. And I've got one up on YouTube. But it's interesting because when I retrained him, when I first got him, so I've had him since he's left the track. I used to ride him track work. I didn't retrain him the way I retrain now. There was a lot of gaps, and I can see some struggles that I had back then that now I know why I was having them. So it's interesting because when I brought him in, he saw a change just in the environment, and he's blown up, and he's a big 17-hand horse, and he's actually got out of my grip. He's pulled away. So that just shows some deficits in his training for a start that I need to work on. And two, they pick up anything. So he's seen a change and he's just run away before, they don't really analyze horses. They associate. It's really important to be aware of that when you get an off the track thoroughbred and you haven't done any of the retraining of your basic foundations of your stop and go and that. They can be you have to be careful because they'll shy, and they can you've got to be safe. They can be dangerous. Any horse can be dangerous, but off the track thoroughbreds, one, they're a hot breed. Okay, they've come out of a very highly stimulating environment. And just be wary when you're handling them. If you've got one that some are very, very quiet and docile. You get some very quiet off the track thoroughbreds that, as I said, may shut down, more than express themselves in the flight response. And that's another topic we can talk about, which is a bit of what they call learned helplessness. So going back to the fear response, so just being aware that horses will manifest their fear in the flight response. Now, if that doesn't solve the problem, they're stuck in situations where they can't get away from the fear, they can't get away from the pain or whatever, it becomes what I just mentioned. They shut down. They can go into a form of learned helplessness. So they become a bit dull. There's an off the track thoroughbred that I've currently got in retraining, Ty. And I'm going to say he was a little bit like that. Because I looked back on his race career, and I know what he's experienced, and he's a beautiful, beautiful horse, but he was very shut down and very, very dull to the aids and everything. So just because they're not expressing fear as a flight response doesn't mean that they haven't experienced fear. They've probably gone past it and gone more into a shut down type of response. That's a topic in itself, so we won't go into that, but I just wanted to talk in this live about the fact that horses off the track thoroughbreds I would nearly guarantee, have experienced many situations of fear. and it does express itself in the flight response. So what I've gone through here, so this is where when you're retraining, this is where equitation science principles and going right back to the basics makes such a massive difference. And I wanted, because I mean, it's like you're just continually learning. So I wanted to give another example of one of my off the track thoroughbreds, Nina, who hasn't come into. She's been off. She never raced. I think she may have had a jump out. She's 10 now. I haven't done much with her because I have so many horses. And she has just like that. She come in, I handle her and teeth and feet and all of that, but she hasn't actually been retrained as yet. So she's going to be another one of my exciting off the track thoroughbreds that I'm going to film and follow the process through. Now she's interesting because she never raced, but she's a windsucker. She's, you can see that she's quite a stressy mare. And I've had situations with her where when I've put, so because I have a team of horses and they live in a herd environment, yet they come in of a daytime and they're all in their individual yards and that, and I put them back out. If she has separation anxiety, and I've brought her in a few times. So just for example, I've tied her up and then put the horses out. You know, I brought her in away from the herd and she got very, very stressed, moving, you know, wanting to get back to the horses and extremely stressed. And also too, if I've been putting them out in the yards and she's one of the last ones out from the yards and she's one of the last ones to go back in the paddock or even halfway through, because I have 20 horses, she'll get extremely stressed in the yard. And then when I lead her out, there's been situations where she's reared up and she's spun around and like full on, like I'm working at the track. And you've got a very, you know, a horse in training that's, you know, explosive or something like that. And it's interesting because I was only putting her out yesterday. So what I've been doing, I actually haven't, so I would say officially brought her in for retraining. But I've been doing some work with her just as I'm leading her back and forward and slowing her legs down. So the stop and go response in hand, just with your head collar and lead rope. And when she's a type of horse that will speed up a leg. So if you're leading her out, she'll pull you or she wants to rush and she gets antsy, you know, sort of anxiety, and she's not a dawdly slow horse. So what I've been doing is every time, so I'm leading her out and she may be getting a little bit anxious, wanting to get out with her horses. For instance, when I've gone back and she's reared up and spun around and pig rooted and everything, I didn't let her go. I could still hold on to her. So that was really good because she didn't achieve, if they get a reward from their behavior, then it's going to reinforce that behavior. For example, if when she was rearing up on the lead and pulling back and wanting to go out with follow other horses out as they were walking around the corner, she got away from me, that would have rewarded her behavior. It's reinforced it, and she knows that if she does it again, she'll try it again to get away, if that makes sense. So she didn't get away from me, and I could keep a hold of her with that, which was really good. But what I wanted to say is just me leading her in and out of the yards and just practicing my stop and go. So in hand, so if she starts to walk faster, I ask her to stop. Just some pressure on the lead rope, ask her to slow her legs down, stop. As soon as she does that, I say, good girl, give her a scratch or a stroke on the face and walk forward again. And I repeat that as we're walking out. When we're retraining our stop and go responses or all our responses, we want to do them in repetitions. So horses learn by repetition and by reinforcement. So I did that, just walking her back in or back out of the yard into the paddock. I did my stop and go. You can do 4 to 5 sets, 4 to 5 repetitions, okay? And then you'll notice that she will stop lighter and she'll slow down. And it's interesting because just doing this over the last, I've been doing it for the last few weeks. I put her out yesterday and she was one of the last horses to go out. She didn't get stressful in the yard, okay? So she wasn't anxious when she was one of the last horses to go out. And also too, when I was leading her out there, she didn't reef and pull me. All the other mates were out there except for Toothy and Nelly, who are still in the yards. And she was relaxed walking out. And I thought, wow, all I've done with her is practice my stop and go responses in hand in the lead rope. So it just really goes to show separation anxiety, anxious behavior, the flight response, and any type of conflict behavior can be really improved by basic training. So you stop and go in hand. I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee here. And it's amazing what a difference it makes. And I'm just going to read a little article out of my ESI book here. But going back to many years ago when I got my first Off the Track Thoroughbred, before I even worked in racing, so this was a long while ago, I got moto in 1998, 1999, and he was a really hot little Off the Track Thoroughbred, 16 hands and a little pocket rocket. And the type of Off the Track Thoroughbred, and I was so inexperienced back then. I loved him, but I was so inexperienced back then, and he was the type of thoroughbred that you couldn't put your legs on because he was so hot and sensitive, and he was really rushy. So and he wasn't dull or lazy. He was like, of all Off the Track Thoroughbreds together, I've got this little hot pocket rocket. And I know the trainer he came from. I know that he had experienced, he'd had a steroid implant. So he's had drugs in his system, and he also had been what they call jiggered, because I know that the trainer got in trouble for that. So a jigger is when they put an electric, it's illegal, and so are the steroids in racing, but especially way back then, dodgy trainers would do things. And my poor Moto, his name was Moto, had come from this trainer, and I know that he had a massive amount of fear. He'd experienced a massive amount of fear. And so I get him, and I had no idea about equitation science. I was your typical, I was just starting my level ones, very traditional in your dressage, and my coaches were your very traditional, your dressage and your show jumping coaches down your level one, Equestrian Australia, just your very traditional coaching and teaching. And I struggled with moto. I struggled with moto for about, 10 years more. We did eventing and show jumping and that, but wow, I mean, I had no breaks with him. He was a very tense, stressed horse. Look back now, he would have been riddled with ulcers. I didn't even know about ulcers back then. No one mentioned anything to me. I had no idea about anything. So I got him, and I was very inexperienced. So I was just took on board. I was working in riding schools. Took on board what my riding instructor suggested to me, and I just struggled for years and years and years with moto. Even when I started learning equitation science and that, I still struggled with him because I when you get a hot off the track thoroughbred, a thoroughbred that rushes. Okay, so really, like moto had this really fast trot, and everything was rush, and I had very little brakes, and he'd put his head really way down low. And these type of horses, so a very hot, fiery off the track thoroughbred, is harder to retrain than a horse that's sort of dull and not as responsive. And this quite often goes back to their genetics and breeding as well. My moto was by Air de France, and he was a very hot type of horse. Like in racing, you'll get certain breeds that can be more difficult, more express the hot bloodness more. And then you get other breeds that are known to be lovely, and like I Am Invincible. Like every I Am Invincible that I've ridden is just so beautiful, or more than ready, things like that. So yeah, their genetics definitely make a difference. And had I known now with moto what I know now back then, wow, what a different story it would have been. I don't regret it because I've got that to look back on. And we did end up getting through things, and yeah, I had moto for 18 years. So from the time he got off the track until the time he passed, he ended up with Cushing's, and his liver failed. So it was very sad, but I had wonderful 18 years and a big learning experience. So yeah, just looking at how much fear he would have had in his body. I've gone on a tangent. I can't remember what I was going to say with that, my moto. Um, oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So how approached his retraining. Well, I didn't even know anything about retraining, but the first thing we did was put him out for a spell, come back, didn't treat for ulcers, straight into riding. I did that run around. Okay, so this run around, there was a natural horsemanshipy person that came in, so running them around the round yard and asking them to turn in, asking them to what's it called, um, connect, join up. Okay, join up. Um, this isn't a positive experience. This isn't the best. This isn't a positive way to train a horse, because when you're running a horse round a round yard, you're pushing them away. You're creating a fear response in them, so they're fleeing. You're making them flee, and they are expressing the fear response, and also too, they you have no control of their legs. Okay, so when they join up, it's sort of like they're associating, if they slow down, okay, it's the best of the best of a bad situation. Basically, they're giving up when they come in. So they're not associating you with a positive experience. They're not associating you with calmness, and also too, you're not able to control their movements. And it's when you can control their movements, okay, it creates calmness in the horse. I've got a good little a little bit of the Equitation Science that I'm going to read here. Academic Horse Training is a wonderful book. But yeah, so for examples, the round yard work where you're running them around a round yard. So what are you doing with them? You're creating fear, you're creating the flight response in them. Okay, so the more they practice the flight response, the more they're going to do it. And we want to minimize them expressing the flight response as much as possible. And an example of that is, going back and retraining your basic responses. So going back to moto, I didn't do any in-hand work. I chased him around a round yard. Of course, the natural horsemanship trainer used to come in and do that. When I started having my lessons, the first thing was get on and pull him into a frame. And I couldn't do that at all. I had no, but my instructor got on and she had him going around in this frame and all of that. But when I got on, he was really heavy and leaning on the bit and on the forehand, and it was just a mess. So I didn't go back and retraining him in hand. I didn't teach him any self-carriage. And when he was being ridden by my coaches and that, it also wasn't teaching him to be in self-carriage. It was teaching him he was forced into a frame, and I couldn't ride him. So even though my instructors could ride him, I was back then, I can tell you, I was one of those students and people that would cry. I just thought I was a complete failure. I looked around and I thought everyone else was doing wonderfully with their horses, and I was hopeless. I was a loser. I had no self-confidence back then, and I just didn't know, I couldn't understand why, and I was in Sydney too, in the equestrian centre down there, so it was all this framed in. Everyone was going around with these short choppy horses, like so bad now, but back then I thought, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm a loser, I'm a failure. And yeah, I've experienced all that. I don't know what to do, and why can't I do what everyone else is doing? But I can see now the absolute fails that happened, and what, back then, and why I was having so many struggles. Had I gone back and retrained him in hand first, just teaching him self-carriage with his stop and go, and then when I got on him and and could ride him, he naturally would have been a lot softer in the bridle, because one, I would have given him the physical strength by teaching him in hand first to be able to be in self carriage, because they've got body memories as well. Not only are they have associations mentally with experiences, but like us, our muscle memory. Okay, so in racing, they use their body in such a completely different way. We have to retrain that as well. So retraining off the track thoroughbreds is very much a holistic approach, which you incorporate rehabilitation mentally as well as physically. But I just wanted to go back on, because I get on a bit of a tangent here. Sorry, I just had a message pop up then. Why retraining the basic responses is so good. And this is from the Equitation Science book I'm going to read out. Chasing, so here, so basically their flight response in horses is their resistance to extinction characteristic of the flight response. So this was studied in the mid-90s by a trainer called Joseph Ledoux, if I've pronounced that right. So going back to Off the Track Thoroughbreds, so because we know they've most probably more than often experienced the fear, expressed the fear response many times over, repetition, so I've learnt it, associating you as a handler, the rider, as a fearful experience. They've got all those associations and memories, so we need to retrain that. Now, the interesting thing when a horse expresses the fear response, it's never going to be deleted. Those memories are never going to be deleted. So they can learn so fearful stimuli receive special attention in the brain. So fear responses such as shying or bolting are learned a lot faster, and often in just one single experience, and they stay there. They're never deleted in the brain than other learned responses such as your stop and go or your dressage things, any other type of training. But what can happen is, and this is so relative, I'm having a word thing. So related to Off the Track Thoroughbreds. I think I need another sip of coffee. You can suppress. Okay, so the fear response can be suppressed with careful training. So what happens is that it becomes less likely for them to retrieve it. So it's like putting those fearful memories and experiences back right back in your files. So like a filing system, and it's right back at the back, and you've got all these positive associations and experiences in front of them. Okay, so you just keep repeating, and what happens is it's less likely for the fearful response to come up. And this is why retraining correctly is so important, and not to cut short your retraining, to spend as long as you need on the basic foundations, building a really good solid foundation of retraining your basic responses to light responses, and then building up from there. And a client's horse that I have in training at the moment, Ty, he's such a perfect example of this horse has been with me for nearly 6 months now, and it's so worth it. It's just, I've had the opportunity to be able to put such a good foundation on him. It's just shows how important time and patience and the basics make such a difference. So you create a safe horse, you create a horse that's calm, and this is really important. So going back to chasing horses around, so he's saying the flight response it should be avoided. It should have informed all horse trainers back then to avoid using any fearful behaviors in training. So avoiding any type of training methods in horse training that is going to create fear in the horse, okay, make them fearful and get them to express this fearful response. So whacking a horse with a whip, you see it, you know, in racing all the time. I mean, look at racing. Okay, horses are flogged in racing. They're, you know, the whip. I mean, they're experiencing fear. They're running in racing most of the time off fear. Okay, chasing horses around round pens. It says may be the means to an apparently successful end, which is what they call join up, but the cost is also very high. No human really knows what the horse experiences when you chase it, and you can imagine a horse is a prey animal. Okay, they experience being chased in the wild by a predator. So when you're chasing a horse around a round yard, you're actually the predator to the horse. Okay, so that's not a good association for your horse to have with you. So it's saying here it's so much better to avoid any of these type of training methods. And it says here, which is it can be as much, so chasing a horse around a round yard, whacking a horse with a whip to make them run faster and faster and faster. It can be as much as a form of violence as any physical abuse. When experienced, the flight response also has the characteristic of what is known as spontaneous recovery. Okay, returning just when you least want it. For example, during training of a more challenging responses. So just say you're training your horse and you've done your basic foundation training, and then you're getting up and just say you're going out to do your novice or just say medium level dressage, and you're training shoulder in or something. You're asking your horse for something, or you're starting to jump and you haven't consolidated the basic responses really well, and you've probably gone a little bit too fast with your horse. That's when they start to panic. They're fearful of something, and it's going to come up in their training. They might start to shy. They might start to refuse at the jumps, things like that. So for example, during training of a more challenging responses, so that's just what I mentioned there. So remember, it applies only to situations of fear. So chasing or lunging and driving fearful horses in long reins should be stopped. So, okay, so long reining, things like that. A long reining a horse, you're off the track thoroughbred, if you haven't done any of the really good in-hand work first and getting them to be in self-carriage, getting them to stop nice and softly in the head collar and then in the bit. You shouldn't long rein until you've achieved self-carriage in hand first. But in saying that, round pen and lunging of horses that are not fearful is not detrimental. Think hard about the mental state of your horse when you intend to lunge or chase. So I really want to put a big emphasis on that. Always think about the mental state of your horse. Look at their face, look at their body, how are they expressing themselves, and which is another live that I can do, signs of pain and fear in horses. So body observation and being aware of how your horse is looking, how are their eyes looking, is a really, they express a lot of fear and pain in their facial expressions. So just one more thing here. Once the brain has perceived a fearful stimuli, alertness is raised and the adrenal glands give the heart a kickstart. So yeah, you could just imagine. So this is examples. So other less important stimuli are ignored, and that's why a bolting horse in full-blown flight response can gallop into fences, cars, and other obstacles. So fear, okay, in a fearful situation, if a horse hasn't been retrained correctly, and you know, it can be quite dangerous. So something to really keep in mind. I won't go on here because I'm probably going to talk too much, but I wanted to talk about, I'll just mention quickly here because I might talk about this in our next live. So, as I mentioned before, in horse training, the flight response should be suppressed during any significant expression so that the horse doesn't learn to incorporate it in his training. So this can be done by slowing the legs of the horse. Okay, so slowing the legs of a horse. So if your horse goes to shy or something, always slowing your legs, to coming back to a downward transition, to a stop response, stops the horse from expressing the fear response, okay, which is what we want. We don't want them to increase distance between a fearful stimuli, but we don't want to be flooding the horse and forcing it into something. I won't talk more about that because what I'll do, it'll probably be a little bit too of an information overload, and what I'll do in our next slide is I'll talk about, we know that we want to avoid the horse expressing the fearful response. We want to instead train using methods that avoid the horse being fearful and avoid the horse expressing the fearful response. So I might leave this live here in regards to that, because I'll talk about in another session, our Q&A, I'll talk about why retraining the basic responses in hand is really, really important, using the Equitation Science Principles, and how it benefits the horse and creates calmness in the horse instead of fear. So I'll talk about that in our next live. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions in regards to this live, and also too, as I said, you can pop any questions in the group anytime. If you want me to answer a question, you maybe answer a question you have in regards to your horse or off the track thoroughbred. That's it for this live. I think I'll leave it at that. There's so much I could just keep talking forever. Thank you. Once again, if you watch this replay and you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below. Just tag me and I'll answer them for you. And we'll talk about the progression of what to do to avoid expressing the fear response in our next Q&A. So have a lovely day wherever you are, or evening, and I will see you in the group. And I'll see you for next week's Q&A, which will be Sunday. I'm back on Sundays now. Okay, bye.